Hello friends, welcome to new Happy Learning video. Today we're going to learn about our prehistory. The first thing we need to know is that our prehistory is divided into 3 different periods: Paleolithic, Neolithic, and the Metal Ages. The Paleolithic begins with the appearance of the first human beings and ends 8,000 years before Christ. During the Paleolithic period, people were nomads, meaning that they didn't live in one place. No, they were constantly on the move, in search of animals to hunt. As they were hunters and gatherers, they needed to follow the animals in order to capture them, and at the same time, they collected wild fruits they found on their way. They lived in tribes, in small groups formed by families, and they found refuge in caves where they would paint on the wall. These paintings were done with a mixture of charcoal, earth, animal fat, and water. Look, here are a few examples. The truth is, it's absolutely fascinating to think that these first paintings, these first artistic representations, were drawn thousands of years ago, don't you think? Both Paleolithic men and women wore animal skins, which they had hunted previously. And they used tools such as an axe and spears made out of stones, wood and bones, which they themselves carved. With the passing of time, or rather centuries, these first human beings became more and more intelligent, and they began to domesticate animals, such as dogs, goats, sheep and pigs. They also began to cultivate plants, which were then eaten. With the arrival of agriculture and farming, everything changed. Man stopped being a nomad and became sedentary, and the first villages were made. This is when the Paleolithic period ends and the Neolithic begins. The Neolithic started 8 million years before Christ, when we discovered agriculture and farming. And it's finished with the beginning of the Metal Ages. Men and women in the Neolithic produced food by cultivating the land and domesticating animals. We can say that they were the first farmers and agriculturalists of our history. Better yet, our prehistory. As they had to look after their crops and animals, they constructed small villages and began to settle in them permanently, meaning that they transformed into sedentary, not like the Paleolithic, who were nomads because they were moving constantly. The first Neolithic settlements were situated in very fertile lands, near rivers so they could access water easily, needed for their crops as well as allowing their animals to drink. You know how important water is in our life. The first plants that were cultivated were cereals such as wheat or pulses like chickpeas. But do you know which were the first animals to be domesticated? Well, it was dogs, sheep, goats, and pigs. During the Neolithic era, many interesting things were invented, such as ceramic and fabric. But the most important invention was the wheel. Everything became so easy for men and women in the Neolithic, especially when they started using metals. This is the point where the Neolithic ended and a new era in prehistory commenced. The Metal Ages. which commenced approximately 6,500 years BC and finished when the first written language was born. The first metal which was used was copper, then bronze, which is a mixture of copper and tin, and finally iron, which is a much more abundant mineral and therefore easier to find in nature. In order to mold these metals, they were melted at extremely high temperatures and transformed into the desired shape. This is how utensils like tools, weapons, and decorations were made. This process is called metallurgy. Through metallurgy, crafts and trade began. The metallurgists were the first specialized craftsmen, as the metallurgy is a very complex and difficult task which few knew how to do. The rise of agrarian production and the appearance of crafts caused bartering, that is, the exchange of products. This is when trade began. Trade, over time, made some villages grow in size, turning into cities. This then created large commercial and cultural exchange between these new cities, and new inventions such as sailboats and wagons used to transport goods were made. Trade also changed society by creating social classes, the rich and the poor, the powerful and the slaves. During the Metal Ages, people began questioning the mysteries of life, as well as death, and the first religious representations arose. Constructions called megaliths were created with large blocks of stone. Mega meaning large, and liths stone. The simplest megalith was the menhir, a large stone reverted vertically into the ground. Dolmens were also constructed, such as the ones we see in these images.
The Metal Age ended with the appearance of writing 4,000 years before Christ.
And with this, prehistory comes to an end, but history commences. Did you find learning about prehistory interesting? Paleolithic, Neolithic, and the Metal Ages? We definitely did, because by getting to know our past, we understand our present and make our future better. Goodbye, friends. See you next time.
Hello, friends. Welcome to a new Happy Learning video. Today, we're going to learn about the first stage of prehistory. Today, we're going to get to know the Paleolithic period. The first thing we need to know is that prehistory is divided into three major periods: the Paleolithic, the Neolithic, and the Metal Age. The Paleolithic period begins with the appearance of the first human beings and ends 8,000 years before the birth of Christ. During the Paleolithic period, men were nomadic. They did not live in the same place. They were instead continuously traveling after the animals that they hunted. As they were hunters and gatherers, they had to follow the animals in order to catch them, and took advantage of these travels to pick up wild fruits that they found on the way. They lived in tribes, in small family groups, and they sheltered in natural caves where they performed paintings. These paintings were made with charcoal and earth, all mixed with fat and water. Here you can see some of them. Isn't it impressive to think that these paintings, these first artistic representations, were made thousands and thousands of years ago? Wouldn't you agree? Paleolithic men and women dressed in the skins of the animals they hunted and used utensils such as axes and spears made of stone, wood, and bone they carved themselves. Over the years, over the centuries, these first human beings became more and more intelligent and began to domesticate some animals, such as dogs, goats, sheep, and pigs. They also started to grow plants that were then eaten. It is in this moment, with the advent of agriculture and livestock, when everything changes, when men are no longer nomadic and become sedentary as the first settlements appear. This is where the Paleolithic period ends and the Neolithic begins. But this is another stage of prehistory that we will learn about in another video. Have you enjoyed this trip to the past? Did you find the trip to the Paleolithic interesting? I certainly did. Goodbye, friends. Hello, friends. Welcome to a new Happy Learning video. As we all know, the prehistoric period is divided into three important periods: the Paleolithic, the Neolithic, and the Metal Age. And today we are going to learn about the Neolithic. It started 8,000 years before Christ with the discovery of cattle farming. The men and women of the Neolithic period were able to produce food by cultivating the land and domesticating animals. One could say that they were the first farmers of our history, or rather, our prehistory. As they had to look after the crops and animals, they constructed small villages and began to settle in them permanently, meaning they became sedentary. Unlike the people of the Paleolithic period, who were nomads because they were constantly travelling. The first Neolithic settlements were located in fertile lands, near rivers, because in this way they could access the water needed for both their crops as well as their animals to drink. You already know that water is vital for life. The first plants that were cultivated were grains, such as wheat, or pulses like chickpeas. But do you know which were the first animals to be domesticated? Well, it was dogs, goats, sheep, and pigs. During the Neolithic era, many interesting things were invented, such as ceramic and fabric. But the most important invention was the wheel. Today, in the 21st century, we still use the wheel for loads of different things, as you can see in these images. The truth is, it is absolutely fascinating to learn about the past and where things have come from, don't you think? Goodbye, friends! Prehistory is divided into three main periods: the Paleolithic, the Neolithic, and the Metal Ages. Today, we are going to learn about the last stage in prehistory. Today, we are going to learn about the Metal Ages. The Metal Age begins approximately in the year 6500 BC, when man began to use different types of metals instead of stones to make tools. The first metal to be used was copper, then bronze, which is a mixture of copper and tin, and finally iron, a much more abundant mineral and therefore easier to find in nature. In order to mould the metals, they were melted at very high temperatures, which gave them the desired shape. This is how utensils such as weapons, tools, and ornaments were made. This process was called metallurgy. Metallurgy was the beginning of craftsmanship and trade. Metallurgists were the first specialized craftsmen, since metallurgy was a complex and difficult job that very few people knew how to do. Increase in agricultural production and the emergence of craftsmanship led to bartering, or in other words, the exchange of products. This is when trade came into being. Trade, in turn, caused some settlements to become larger, turning them into cities. A great commercial and cultural exchange then began between these new cities, and inventions such as the sailing ship and carts were invented to help move goods. Trade also changed society by creating social classes: the rich and the poor, the powerful and the slaves. During the Metal Age, humans began to ask themselves questions about the mysteries of life and death, and the first religious representations emerged. Constructions were erected which were called megaliths because they were made of large blocks of stone. Mega means big and lith means stones. The simplest megalith was the menhir, a large stone stuck vertically into the ground. But dolmens were also built, such as the ones you can see in the pictures. The Metal Age ended with the appearance of writing about 4,000 years ago. But that quite literally is another story. Goodbye, friends! Until the next video!
The wheel is one of the oldest inventions of humanity, and for sure one of the most important. Contemporarily, we couldn't imagine a world without it, since it is crucial for many things. But not only for vehicles like cars or bicycles, but also, for example, for the function of a watch or a merry-go-round. The wheel was first seen on small clay tables, discovered in Mesopotamia. These tables represent a car with wheels and are more than 5,000 years old. According to archaeologists, the wheel was invented in Mesopotamia over 6,000 years ago, but we don't know who the inventor was. Supposedly, the first wheel was invented after the first human beings used cylindrical tree trunks to move heavy things. Observing this, someone very intelligent must have thought that making a wooden circle with an axis, like current wheelbarrows, it would be much easier. And from then on, the first potter's wheel and cars appeared. Crafts were the first to use the wheel, and it made it easier and faster for potters to make their pots, thanks to the potter's wheel. Here we can see how two wheels and an axis help this craftsman endlessly. Through time, the wheel was also used in transport. Animals didn't have to carry heavy weights on their backs. Now, thanks to wheels, they pulled the cars and moved a lot more weight with less effort. And from then, the wheel has been an essential partner to human beings. Look, look! The number of wheels we can see around us. The truth is, this is such a cool invention, don't you think? Goodbye, happy friends! See you in our next happy learning video.